Hello and good evening. Sorry we are late, everybody. So again, some technical hitches, but they're all sorted now. Yeah, an interesting show we've got tonight, Gary.
Yes.
A subject that I'm going to say is on everybody's lips at one point in the last 3 to 4 years. And tonight we have a very special guest, writer of research, Christina Engand. She wrote a few books that we all need to read. That's all I can say on that. I mean, as you hear Christine talk about a book and what's in a book, I'm sure you're going to agree and hopefully buy a copy. Like I said, we'll get into it. I'll let Christine talk about it. She's, like I said, it's the book speaks for itself. That's all I'm going to say. So without further ado, welcome, Christina. You can unmute you.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
Good evening, Christina.
Good evening.
Could you just tell us a bit about yourself and the audience about yourself and what you're doing while you're here tonight, please, Christine?
Well, I'm a mother, but I'm also a journalist and an author. I've written on most of the websites on vaccination policy and adverse reactions to vaccinations. Also adverse reactions to drugs as well, but the book that we're discussing tonight is about vaccination. Sorry, I've got an echo. I've been speaking about these things for a very long time, and it all came about was because I adopted 2 disabled children. Back, the first one was adopted. Daniel was adopted in 1990, and the second one was 1996. So sorry, it's a very long time ago now. Yes, so I adopted 2 children with disabilities, and over time, one of them, particular Daniel, he's sadly is no longer here. I lost him in last November, so it's quite a raw subject. But Daniel had a lot of things wrong. He was really he was described by the adoption place as global developmental delay. And I've learned since that this global developmental delay can mean anything from being severely autistic to anything they want to. They just hide autism usually under the global developmental delay sort of heading. And Daniel he had autism, but I didn't know he had autism. He was just very slow. He walked very awkwardly. He held his hands up when he walked. I adopted him at 4, and he was a child that was classed as unadoptable, really. He was a 4-year-old boy and with disabilities, and boys are very difficult to adopt. So they don't find families very easily, especially when they're older children. So the nice healthy white babies, and I will say white babies because that was at the time I was adopting, that was the kind of thing. I wasn't allowed to adopt an ethnic minority. I wasn't allowed to adopt a mixed race child. I was only allowed to adopt a white child because I was white and I was a single mother. I think these laws changed on that.
I believe it has, yeah.
I hope so. I hope so. It needed to change.
Legislation has come out. It's basically racial equality. The equality laws mainly. It's discrimination.
Yeah, it was discrimination because often these children, especially children that mixed races, they often had a white mother and a black father. I mean, it was just the way it was, and I could never understand that. But it was the way it was. But little healthy white babies, or even now any colour baby really, they can be adopted very easily. But the older they get, the more difficult it is for the child to find a family. And 4-year-old little boys with disabilities, it's very hard to find a family. So he was classed as unadoptable. It turned out, and he was diagnosed just shortly after I got him, that he was actually had mild cerebral palsy, learning difficulties and various other problems. he was just a child that didn't thrive very well. He was off balance. He had lots of problems, but I didn't know he was autistic. I just thought he was just generally delayed. But he had some weird sort of behaviors, let's put it like that, behaviors. He had
Mannerism.
ADHD as well.
Yeah.
And I didn't know, but but years later, I think it was about 1999, I got accused of Munchausen's. I got accused of making up their disabilities to get attention from the medical profession. Why I would want that, I don't know, but that's what I was
Well, yeah,
accused of.
as we was just for the audience, as we was discussing before the show.
I better explain. Sorry, Munchausen's by proxy, Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a term that really blames. It's accuse the parent term. It's anything that they, especially after
Overbearing
a
mother
vaccine
figure.
injury, especially after a vaccine injury.
Yeah.
It's
The class was an overbearing mother. They use it as an excuse.
yes, Munchausen's is really a little bit further. They make up medical conditions to get intention, to get the child to be examined, to get the child x-rays, to get the child medicine that they don't need. And it can go right on to actually killing the child to get attention from the authorities. I don't know why you'd want that. I really don't. I mean, I'd get more attention sort of doing other things, but yeah, because I certainly wasn't getting the attention.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of people won't understand this because in my own research, as we were talking about before, there's been many children actually taken from families due to made up diagnosis and the how can I say, the possibility of Munchausen's and stuff like that. So
yes, it's possibility.
Yeah,
it ended
there is.
up that I had traits of, but I didn't have anything. I wasn't making up anything. And in fact, the things that I was actually told that I was making up was actually the things that they came with and the things that they'd been diagnosed by people before I'd even met the children. So it was a bizarre sort of set of circumstances. But I didn't realise at the time that Daniel had been in his paperwork, which actually the person that led me to believe and understand all this, and the person that was first connecting the dots way before me, was a person called Lisa Blakemore Brown. Now, she was a lovely lady. She was a psychologist. I believe she still is a psychologist, but she has come out of the work a lot, which I can't blame her after all what happened to her. But she started to connect the dots with vaccination injuries and false accusations of Munchausen's. And this is really how the book came about, because she found that Daniel had been actually vaccinated, had a vaccine. Well, he had the MMR, but he had the Urabi strain of the MMR, the Plusrex, the one that was banned in this country, and he had that one, and it was then that he lost a lot of abilities. He found things difficult. It was then that the behaviours became obvious, and it was just after then he got very severe diarrhea, very, very bad stomach all the time, always very bad tummy aches. It was horrible. It really was. Well, I didn't know, but it was connected with the vaccine. Now, she found out through looking through his papers in more detail that she found that a foster mother had mentioned it, that he'd had the vaccine and was very poorly afterwards, and his stomach had never really recovered. Now, this all led to, by all this happening, I was accused, and obviously I'd started to look into it more, because Lisa had said that most of her cases of Munchausen's by proxy had vaccine injuries, and that it was all linked back to the vaccine injuries. And this is where a Professor Roy Meadow came into it, because it was very, very interesting, because she found she managed to get hold of a set of papers. Now, the Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisation is called the JCVI, and they used to, years ago, do minutes of meetings, and they'd list all the doctors that were in the minutes of the meeting. These are meetings that really discuss the vaccinations in detail. They discuss the adverse reactions in detail, and they choose to ignore them mostly. And they okay the vaccine to be either brought into the country or just like the COVID vaccine, you know, when they brought that in, they were the ones that said, yes, bring it in. And yes, everybody should be vaccinated, or as many people that will accept the vaccination should be vaccinated with the COVID vaccine. It's a bit like that. But they were the ones that brought the MMR in. And the MMR had been already, they'd already been, this is all in the book. The book is called Vaccination Policy in the UK Government, The Untold Truth. And it's the untold truth part that comes out in my book, because when the MMR was brought in, it was in 1988, it was brought into this country, and it was called Plusarex. And it had the rabies strain of mumps in it. And it was turned out to be a very, very dangerous vaccination indeed. Because it was causing absolute havoc. It was causing so many disabilities. But shortly before this, in 1977, a Professor Roy Meadow was the one that brought the term Munchausen syndrome by proxy into the forefront. He was the one that brought it into use into the medical profession, And he had written a paper called The Hinterlands of Child Abuse.
Technically speaking,
Sorry? It was
technically Munchausen by proxy. I think that come about just the same way as toxic masculinity did. It was kind of a fumbled together, I believe, on one paper, and then just got disseminated outwards, and then everyone just took it as a
given,
clinical.
Yeah. He's written many papers, and most of them
which it usually does if it's pushed enough by the right companies.
Yes, I mean, this particular paper is called The Hinterlands of Child Abuse. It is covered in the book. The Hinterlands of Child Abuse was written in 1977, and he was describing cases where he believed he wrote a paper called Non-Accidental Salt Poisoning. And it was where he believed mothers were force feeding their children salt to get attention, so that the children would become very, very sick indeed, and in some cases die. It's very, very rare, but he used this particular case that he had, where a mother had kept bringing the child back to the hospital, saying that the child was being ill, the child was being sick, and when they took it into hospital, when the mother wasn't there, this was what he wrote in the paper. When the mother wasn't there, the child was okay, but when she came in at the weekends, he got ill again. But he also mentioned that he and his team couldn't understand how she was force feeding him the salt. So they actually force fed the child. It actually states it in the paper. Why he would say this, who knows? But he said that they'd fed the child 20 grams of salt.
Whoa. And
the child actually died. But he doesn't say. He says that the child, the child later died. But was it? He hadn't looked into other diseases. That was a problem. And he is very, very key into all this story, because really he was brought in. After that paper, it went viral, and everybody was talking about Munchausen's by proxy. And basically, he said that the mother had force-fed the child, and that's why the child had died. But he only mentioned in the paper that they'd also given him the baby salt. Now, if the baby had had an illness like diabetes insipidus, which is a diabetes, but instead of sugar, they overload with salt. They have a lot of salt in their blood, and they've got very high sodium content. That he didn't look into any of those possibilities, and there were very many papers that I'd written about the papers as well, all the different papers that preceded his paper. But he just thought it was he brought in this term. And in 1988, and this is where it gets really interesting, because the UK government at that time brought in the MMR with the Plusarex. Now, the Plusarex had been banned in Canada because the Plusarex was called Trivarex. However, they changed the name and brought it into the UK. So it was the same vaccine with the same strains in it, same baby strain of months that had caused all the problems and had been banned in Canada. I think it was banned somewhere else. I think it was Japan as well. And yet they brought it in, changed the name and made it into a new vaccine. Well, when they brought it in, Professor Roy Meadow, for the first time, and he's never been in the papers, he's never been in these meetings since, and he never was in the meetings after, but he was brought in at the same time to discuss adverse reactions to vaccines. He was brought in 1988 when the MMR came in, and he was taken out in 1992 when the vaccine was taken off the market and it was suspended because of all the adverse reactions. And in these meetings, they were discussing the adverse reactions to the vaccines, including the MMR. And that was what it was. They were ignoring the health of children to push the vaccination policy. And that was what my book was all about.
Well, they've actually been doing it for longer than people actually think. I mean,
yes, he had been. He'd been doing it a very long time. And he knew very little about vaccinations at all.
This is the thing in my own research. I mean, I think it's about 100 years worth of vaccination policy within certain books that I have. And it's horrific. The doctors knew, and all the leading doctors in the world, both in America, England, everywhere, was against vaccination. They kind of understood what it was and what it would do, but it was it was just done. It was, I don't know, if you went against it, your career was destroyed. This is why I think a lot of because actually, without going into much detail, this is why the actual medical teaching was actually changed because of the vaccination policy. A lot of people don't know that.
Yes, that's it.
Pharmaceutical companies actually changed how doctors were taught and what they were taught.
Yes, that's it. They did. They're taught in a different way, and the children are taught at school in the science lessons as well.
Yeah, because in some of my books, if you read in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, when some of the doctors are actually writing papers and writing their opinions and because I've got a book where you've got letters going to different people, and they're quite open about their feelings on vaccination and where it's going and what it could lead to. But like I say, then all of a sudden the medical world just decides to close in on it all, and the education changed. So it's like I say, it's been going for a very long time. And it seems to be the same thing over and over again. And this is why I like your book so much, because I think your book puts, especially what I think most of us, especially of a certain age, can understand and relate to moreover personally. Because we've all had to deal with it, or we've all had these vaccines in school or something like that, and we were told complete lies ourselves. So you'll understand.
We've all been told lies. We've been told lies all the way along, and people don't really understand it. I mean, around about the same time as all this was going on in government and these meetings were taking place, the MMR was also given to the soldiers that were going to the Gulf War, and they were given with a heck of a lot of other vaccines as well. And I've got the papers that show, and they're in my book. They're in my book as appendix at the end, some of these, and they show the soldiers being given all these vaccinations, but they actually said, I actually have the document that shows GlaxoSmithKline, because it was a GlaxoSmithKline vaccine. GlaxoSmithKline was actually the person, I think it was David Salisbury, he was buying all the vaccines were being bought by the UK government to actually give the soldiers and the babies at the same time. So they were given to the babies, I think it was 9 months old, the babies here, in the UK, and they were also giving them to the soldiers that were going off to Gulf War, but they were giving them with all different vaccinations, and the soldiers were coming back and saying that they were suffering what we now know is called Gulf War syndrome, and I've got all the evidence and everything that goes along with that. So I was linking all the dots in different places, and I've got a chapter called Joining the Dots, because it is joining the dots, because all these doctors that were involved in these meetings, or the majority of them, were involved with the very drug companies, and I've got all those papers as well, and they're all part of the book, that actually they were actually receiving money or had outside interest with the pharmaceutical companies. So they were all tied in with the actual pharmaceutical companies. So they had outside interest. So they weren't or independent people at all. they're supposed to be
No.
independent doctors that were speaking and doing these meetings in the JCVI, and yet they weren't. And I've proved that, and I've done a money trail as well, where all the money was going and how it was all done.
The conflict of
It's not-
interest is astounding. It's
That's the one. I
astounding.
couldn't think of the name. I was trying to think of conflicts of interest. Yeah, it's getting late for me. I've been up at 4. I was up at 4.
Well, we've tried not to keep it too long,
It's
but
not good.
I know there's going to be a lot of questions from people as we go along.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and you'd need about 10 shows to be able to do the different parts of the book, because just before I wrote the book, and before it was even something that was in my mind, I mean, I was doing all this research, but I wasn't thinking of a book. But a lady, the other doctor that came in, she said to me, I met her. I was speaking in Harley Street on Munchausen's by proxy and my case, and at the same time Andrew Wakefield was speaking, and Lucia Tomaszewicz, who's the other author of the book, and she's a scientist, and she was writing the other, but she was studying the same papers as me, but from a different angle. So I was studying them for the interest of Roy Meadow, because I was fascinated with this Roy Meadow, and also another guy called David Southall, who's all very tied up with it all.
Yes.
And tied up with the Munchausen's allegations. And I was looking into that and how all the vaccines tied into that and where it was heading. And she was looking at the other side. So she said to me, why don't we write a book together? And she said, we ought to make it into a book. And that way, my papers will be there for good, and your work will be there for good. And I said, okay. So that's how we did it. And she was speaking, and it was the first time I'd ever met anybody else that were looking at the same papers as I was.
Well, this is the thing. This is why I love this first book so much, because it's like in my own research. It's like I said, the books I've got and the way I've done it. You've got to get a bit from here, a bit from there, and I don't think some people will understand how much research probably went into this book. But
it was 15 years of research. That book was 15 years of research.
Well, I've never seen something so, I would say, so processable and I'd say easy manageable.
A lot of people say it's an easy read, and I always said when I started writing, because I started writing for a particular reason, because I was mad. But I mean, really and truly, the writing. I started all the writing because I just got very interested in it, and I decided that if I was going to write, and I trained as a journalist, if I was going to write, then I was going to write so parents understood it, because a lot of these things that you read, you haven't got a clue what anybody's talking about. And you need to have a medical dictionary to actually sitting next to you to work out what the hell they're saying. So unless I could understand, I can understand it, no one else will. I'm not that stupid. I'm not stupid. So I thought, well, if I'm finding these papers and this stuff and all the books very hard to understand, how do the parents do it? Because the parents are going to be the ones that are reading the books, because they're the ones that have got the vaccine damaged children.
This is why I would say, even with people about children, read this. Everybody needs to read this anyway, because this is to do with the policy that is governing you as well. I mean, it's like you say, in my research, I've usually got a couple of medical dictionaries and Google, just to
you have to
get my way through things to try and understand medical terms, medical wording, concepts, certain things like that. So sometimes you have to have a degree in a subject before you can even start to understand a book. So that's why I loved it so much. This is why I recommend it to a lot of people so much, because I've talked to people about my research, and it kind of, you just see they're blank expression. But this book puts it in such a way. It's like you say, that's why I think it's so amazing, because it's like you say, the parents can really grasp this. If you don't have to be an avid reader or anything like that, you don't have to understand the medical anything, because the way it's explained with the evidence sourced, it makes it so easy to digest. So everybody, especially parents, need to read this.
I think that. I mean, I've done it, from my own personal angle. I mean, obviously, chapter 4 was my own story and how my story came about, and how I was getting accused and all the different papers and who was saying what, and I was just an innocent parent, And I realised, by being accused that, well, a lot of Lisa's help, because I wouldn't have done any of this without her. She was really my mentor. I mean, she's a wonderful, wonderful person. She's come out of doing the work now. I mean, mainly because she got ground down by it. She had terrible things happen to her, which are in the book. But I mean, the government were getting at her, and everybody, the government, and because she was joining the dots.
Exactly. I think this is.
They don't want you to join the dots. They want you to stay ignorant. That's what they want, but they can't.
Exactly.
Because they're going to be. I'm not the only one. There's a lot of other people that are doing the same, and you're one of them. So we're all doing the same. We're all joining the dots. We're all saying, "Hang on a minute. This doesn't make sense."
It's like I said. I'm from an age group. It's like things like autism. Wasn't really autism about when I was younger. You were just a naughty child. You just needed boundaries and some discipline, and that was all the thing. And it also, and what sort of piqued me is because I've had children with certain conditions, and I linked certain. But I was called crazy, even by my partner, my ex-partners now. But partners at the time, I was called crazy because I was going down a certain path and trying to find answers. And this is what most people will understand out there. This is why books like this mean so much, and this is why you need to have this book, because it probably will get banned soon. But
it probably will.
We will. But this is the thing. It's like we were discussing before the show. It's like a lot of the information myself and Gary and others have collected over the years that we've been doing what we've been doing. Most of that you can't find on Google no more, or any of the search engines.
No, you have to. The best one, I tell you how to find a lot of it. If you want to find a lot of it, don't use the search engine Google. Use the search engine Dogpile. Because if you use the Dogpile search engine, that's the one where a lot of it's still stored.
Because I know Google, after the weekly, that Google cleaned up a lot of websites.
Well, Google did, Amazon did, YouTube did, and they just don't want you speaking about vaccinations, because in it I discuss things like SSPE, which I can't say for the life of me what it stands for, because it's a very long and complicated.
I'm not even going to. I've attempted it once or twice, but I'm not going to attempt it on the show because it's
I think it's subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. I think that's what it is.
Yes, I think that's probably the code. I've never got that close, but if another one's that.
Yeah, I mean, but that was being discussed with the vaccinations and the MMR and the measles vaccine, and it is connected with the measles vaccine. If you look up SSPE, it will say it's connected with the measles vaccination. And even the people in the meetings admit that. And yet, that is the fatal, what Rebecca Carley used to say, Dr. Rebecca Carley, I don't know if you've ever come across her, but Dr. Rebecca Carley used to say that is the fatal form of autism. And, that was fatal form. Now we've got the non-fatal, which is the autism. And it's exactly the same symptoms, except it's not fatal. Well, it is in some cases, I guess, but
it is. I mean, because
people don't die of autism; they die of the things that go with autism.
Exactly, side effects, knock-on effects of the damage. This is my reason. This is why I think people need to read this book, because it's not so much just about Munchausen by proxy and stuff like that. There's a lot in it. I mean, you briefly discussed the yellow card system, which most people
I did. I went into detail about the yellow card system. Yeah.
Most people won't have heard about the yellow card system until very, very recently.
Well, no, they won't do, because it's hidden. They don't want you to know about it. Nobody does.
But they've brought it out now and they're public viewing. But as your book shows, it's been there for a very long time. There has been.
Oh, it's been there for a very long time, yeah. But people weren't using it, and the doctors won't. If your child's vaccinated, if your child is injured by a vaccine, it'll be very hard to get an actual doctor to admit the child's been damaged by the vaccine. Well, that's practically impossible. But if they do, they won't report it to the yellow card. Most of the time, parents are reporting the injury to the yellow card system, and only 10% get reported anyway.
Well,
so you think of how many children are damaged with vaccines, and yet only 10% are actually reported.
That's another thing. This is what I found out a lot of my research is because it's like the vaccine damage fund. A lot of people only just realise that that's a thing recently, but that's been about for a
Yeah.
very long time. And if
It's
you
been
look
out
at
for years and years. In fact, Rosemary Fox was the first one, and that's part of the book as well. Rosemary
Yeah.
Fox was the first one to get that introduced. They did everything they could to her because she had a daughter that was injured by a vaccine, Helen.
And this is what a lot of people. I mean, this book tells a million tales all in one. But it's like that. It's like the vaccine damage. These are all
What I've done
things
is
that
I've
most
outlined
people-
it.
Yeah, sorry.
What I actually did was I outlined it step by step by step.
Mm.
So what I didn't just ramble. It was one of those things that I did it. Each thing led to another thing, led to another thing. So it is done in very sort of easy to read steps, what they were doing and how they were doing it.
It's like with the yellow card system, your description, the way you go and explain it through, I think it's the most comprehensive explanation I've actually seen on paper, to be honest. I've always said this as well. If you have a look at the way you've set it out in the book, and if you try and find out what the government's trying to tell you, they are a stark difference, a very stark difference.
Yes, it is very, very different.
It's like the yellow card system. Most people are understanding this is about because of the pandemic, and they're kind of being honest, but at the same time, they haven't been completely honest. But I was doing some research into the vaccine damage fund, and the payout on that is so small. You've got more chance of winning the lottery.
Small, and it's very hard to get. And I mean, I know parents. I know parents that have got it, and I know parents that have won these cases, but they're very few and far between.
And the payouts ridiculous anyway. That it's not even enough.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And then if you're getting benefits, which a lot of these parents are, then you lose part of the payment. I think it's £150,000. Well, where does that go?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even cover really a couple of years in a special school. £150,000 goes nowhere, but that's the maximum payout. And the thing is, I mean, this is all explained in the book. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, this is why I recommend it to a lot of people, because as I said, it's comprehensive. It's like we can, and this is what we've all kind of been. I said we understand subjects when we talk about like the yellow card system, the vaccine damage fund, and the MR, because they'll have personal experience of this now, and this is why you need to read this book, because this is a way you can understand this, and we really do need to start understanding what they're doing, why they're doing it, and literally there is no moles behind this, and what's coming up with the pandemic treat is about, I think.
I could do with some more sales, so if we can get this, sales up, it would be wonderful. I think more parents should read the book. They really should. Or not even just parents, doctors as well. I'd welcome some doctors to challenge me on it, because I know it categorically. I've got the paperwork.
See, this is what I was just about to say. Some doctors, I think, should read it as well.
And
because I've actually
freedom of information. This is freedom of information. They're freely available to anybody that wants to do the research and anybody that wants to go to the Q archives. I mean, I just got lucky a couple of times. I went to the Q archives at one point, and that's how I found out all about the SSPE, because I went to the archives in Kew, and I don't suppose the little young lady was there anymore, because what she did, she gave me papers that were actually not supposed to be opened for another 75 years. And I managed to get the papers, and of course then I had them all in front of me, and I was just photocopying it all. So this is stuff that's not even supposed to be open now. And I've actually written articles on the papers as well, and it's shocking. It really is. There's so much that's hidden, and these papers weren't even supposed to be given to me.
Yeah,
and
they can make mistakes with certain things. I've had some.
Oh, happy we called it serendipity, a happy accident. Because what she didn't know was she was giving it to somebody that was actually going to use them.
May have suffered. Yes, there is, and this is because I was discussing it before. It's kind of, the book drew me in a lot, because it's sort of, I was studying anyway, but it's kind of It's
Yeah,
like this. Realise every single bit of information in this book is 100% true. So it's a true story. It's not falsified. It's not fiction. This is 100% true.
You see, I can't make up government wording. It's the government that's the words come from the government's lips. It comes from the people in those meetings. So I can't make that up. It's there in black and white. The papers are around. They're freedom of information papers.
Exactly, the very people with like
anybody in any member of public anywhere can get those papers.
Well, we do freedom of information sort of request thing. We a lot of other people we know do as well. It's one of our best tools, I would say. But I think they're going to start closing up a lot more. So, personally, the more information we can gather and somehow compile safely away from their graphs is the best way, I'd say. But this is reading stuff. Reading this book. I mean, it's not a massive book, so we're not talking like Lord of the Flies sort of size. It's an easy book to read. Every parent should have to read it, because if you are truly going to be in a position that, especially after what we've seen and what's been coming out, that you think others are safe and effective and they've been tested. I mean, some have without people knowing, but you need to read this book. You need to start making actual decisions about this, because they go on informed consent. And reading this book, you will be informed, not as they would like to be, but you will be informed.
When they gave the different vaccines to the soldiers that were going to Gulf War, they actually disbanded. I've actually got a paper, and it's an appendix at the back, which states that they were going to stop the animal testing and test it on the soldiers instead. And that is shocking. That is absolutely shocking. They were literally. They were being tested. The vaccines weren't even tested, but they decided, to stop the I think it's Porton Down, but they call it something else in the book. They've got another name for it, but it's Porton Down. It's in Wiltshire, the laboratories where they test the things on animals. Horrible place, but I mean,
Most people
they stopped it all.
They stopped it. Animal rights activists have been attacking that place for a long time, so most people know.
Oh, they have. Yeah.
This is the thing. So
these are the things that are all in the book. There's a lot of appendix that are very interesting in the back.
This is why I like it so much. I like source. I like sources.
Yeah. I've got all the proof in the back, but a lot of the proof. The other stuff is on my website. My website's called Parents and Carers Against Medical Injustice.
Right. If you message me that after, I shall put that as a link into
a Weebly site. Weebly.com.
People can come back and watch it. Please, but vaccination policy, and the UK government, the untold truth, by Christina Engand and Lucilla
Tomaszewicz. She's a scientist, and her paper's going to more of the science side of it all. And her actual part of the book. I did the first half, she did the second, and hers is absolutely amazing. And she's a very, very talented scientist.
Oh, indeed, and a very good writer. Again, I'm going to say, for somebody in our field to be able to put to words something that, as you say, the parents, the everyday man and woman can digest and actually comprehend, I think is amazing. Because like I said, most of the books that I've tried reading on it, you can tell after a while they are deliberately read to misread.
Because they don't want you to understand it. So they make it as scientifically impossible to understand as they can.
Yep. This is why they like to split things off into their own little categories, because you've got subcategories of subcategories of subcategories of subcategories, and you push someone further and further away from the source of the actual
you never really find out what they're actually saying at all.
No, I've noticed is that there's a lot of things that you can find out.
It's like, what are you saying? What can we come to the point? We always laughed about my son, the one that sadly died. He used to take about 4 hours to get to the point. He used to go round and round the houses, and you say, but Daniel, what are you trying to tell me? And it's exactly what these books are like. You can't go in, you start you start reading, and the first few pages are not too bad, and it gets more and more difficult. And then they're leading you here, and they're leading you there, and go to this, go to that. And by the time you just want to give up, you just think, oh, I can't do this, and give up. Well, mine's not a book you can give up on, because
No,
it pulls you in, because it's all coming out, and it just pulls you in. And
well,
it's
that's it.
easy to understand, and that's what I wanted to do. If I was going to write anything, I was going to make it easy to understand. I
And
wanted
it's not just that.
parents to understand.
It's the way I think the book's set up as well, the way it's laid out. Because as you say, so as you read through it, it kind of, like I said, the dots are there. You know the dots are there, but it kind of links a lot of dots as you're going through it at the right pace as well. So you're understanding things you'd probably I would say, many people may overlook if they're doing their own research to
I
kind
know
of
that many
do.
parents will be confused, because it's mostly about Munchausen's, because
Mm,
that's what I was writing about. But it becomes obvious in the first couple of pages that it's really a book about vaccination
yes, and
and
the
not
cover up
Munchausen's.
and the cover up of what they
And
are
the cover
doing.
up.
As I said, I've got books with prominent doctors, world renowned doctors from, like, I think it's 1891. I think one of the letters is, and I think it's 903. Well, prominent doctors that are so against vaccination they call it an abomination.
Mm.
And
They
this was
do.
known back then, and it
Dr.
was this was
Carley, Dr. Rebecca Carley used to. Unfortunately, she got locked up in a mental institution because they couldn't shut her up.
well, this,
They just couldn't shut her up.
well, I actually went to court, and I actually went up against not only one of my ex-partners, but the school. I didn't realise it at first, and this is why I do appreciate a book like this, and what happened to you and what happened to the people in the book, because I don't think people realise it's like when you start a journey like this and you're uncovering this, if you dare to sort of speak about it, you have not just the medical world, the pharmaceutical world, and the government. You have the education authorities, social services. This goes.
Yeah.
It's like a big tentacle of octopus. This goes a long
But if
way.
you have to watch it out, because there's judges and judges that are working in courts. A lot of them are tied up to the drug companies, and they
Well,
might
yes.
be they might be actually linked and have conflicts of interest with the actual the company that the actual vaccine you're talking about comes from. I've found that too in a few
Well,
cases.
I nearly got because basically my accent because I disagree with vaccination. I would say the only one I'm kind of thinking is tetanus, really, because without tetanus. But then again, do we really need the vaccination? This is what I question. But it's the only one that I would say with any kind of provable
They give it out
effectiveness.
too readily, and you don't get a tetanus. You can't get. There's no such thing, and you can look it up as a single tetanus vaccine. You get the DPT. So whenever you go in for a tetanus vaccine, you actually get a 3-in-1.
Yep.
But they don't tell you that.
Yeah. This is another thing as well.
And it's the other two vaccines that
Because this
are
comes
probably more
into
dangerous than
especially
the
what I think because
tetanus.
they're going to start to link vaccination. Well, this is the thing. They do this quite a lot. I've noticed this in my research over many years. They kind of, it's almost like they do it on purpose. They kind of set up these vaccines, and then all of a sudden they're all paired, or there's about 2 to 3 to 4 vaccines in one shot, and you're like, okay. And this is the thing.
If you look up on Back Truth and see my articles on Back Truth, if you put in Christina England Back Truth, you often cut, especially if you put Christina England BA Honours Back Truth, because that's how I come on under it. If you go under and look at that, you'll find all my articles. I've got article after article of parents that have been falsely accused after one baby had about 15 vaccines in one day.
Yep. See, this is what a lot of people don't realise now.
And
I
they
mean,
died, obviously.
yeah. Well, this is the thing. But when I was born, I think you had a handful of vaccines most. Children now, before they're 6 months, I think there's a lot. I think it's 72 vaccines.
Yeah.
Well, they're not even. I mean, you've got things like the vitamin K shot, which is not a vitamin shot at all. It's not even a vitamin. But it's things like this. It's how, because they use language, like you were saying earlier with their books, they use language a lot to trick us because we're ignorant to a lot of.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very very complex subject, and it goes. There's so many links to it, and there's so many sort of strains out. It's like an umbrella. It just umbrellas out. It goes. You know when you throw a stone into a pond or something and it ripples out? Well, it's just
Yes.
like it is.
Mm. Well,
And
this is what I've been trying to get you on.
I was trying to write a book, and I am still writing it, but I'm not quite sure which angle I'm going to take. Called The Triangle of Blame, and the vaccine was going to be in the centre, and it was vaccine. It was vaccination, accusation, and I think it was it vaccine, the vaccine, the injury, and the accusation, and that was the triangle I was trying to get when I was. I'm in the process of writing that, but I've started it, but it just went a bit wrong. But I will get back to it. I've been taken off track a lot.
I know.
Because I also rescue dogs, and I also do a lot of dog raising money for charity and things. So I was also my Facebook page. A lot of it is about dogs, but every so often I'll put the articles in. It's just so that the articles aren't so obvious, but they are there. They are there.
Plus, people will love the post about the dogs now as well, because there is.
Yeah, especially my little dogs. I've got 8 dogs, and they're all most of them are disabled, and they're quite good fun. And Arlo is an amazing little dog.
I mean, I have kept note of them. Some of the difference in some of the dogs as they get the prosthetics, something like that, is amazing. It's not.
Yeah, my little dog's got prosthetic, but the I did an article on the Liberty Beacon, and it's very interesting actually about the pet vaccinations and how the same thing's happening with the pet vaccinations.
Well, this is the thing; it's across the board. This is why I've been trying to get you on for some time now. I think we're trying to arrange this because once you've read this book, The Vaccination Policy and the UK Government, The Untold Truth, once you've read this book, I kind of noticed, and I've been shouting from the rooftops because of a lot of the other research I found. I mean, this goes back a very long way. I've got at least 100 years of stuff in books and stuff like that, where things are being said and things are being outed. This goes back a long way. And once you read this book, for instance, like I said, there's the yellow card system in here. There's other bits in it that you will be able to understand a lot easier reading this book than you will do if you read a government website or anything else like that. And you will see so many. I would say the best way to say it, so we don't get off now, is I'd say similar behaviours in what's in this book and how they approach things, vaccine damage in general, really. And the vaccines, the way they approach it has been the same way. It's okay. It's like this still ring of silence that's put around the whole thing.
It's so easy to blame the parent.
Yeah.
Because they get out of it themselves. Oh, no, it's not us, it's the parent.
You're shifting liability. This is the thing, and this is what I found so amazing about looking at some of the sources that you actually put in the book. You've got the actual people with liability admitting liability, but then blaming somebody else, and then you've got the parents. I think a lot of the time are kind of just taking the burden and going, "Okay, it's me," because of guilt.
I do a lot of work behind the scenes with parents that have been accused. Some of them are in prison, and I've managed to get a lot. One that was. I can't mention too much about him because I'm not allowed to, but he was. I have written about him a lot. He was accused of killing his baby, little girl, and shaking her. And she'd had vaccinations, and shaking her, and it was shaken baby syndrome, and that's another one. That's another flag. People are being accused of that, and he was put into prison for life without parole for first-degree murder. And I've just got him out. He's now back outside now.
Brilliant. See, this is what because they are very much doing it. There's a lot of things I've seen where they do shit a lot, and they blame a lot of things on parents. Diet is another one.
God, yeah. You can't do right for doing wrong. If you vaccinate, you're right. You're wrong.
I was reading one paper and
you're wrong. You can get accused you neglect if you don't vaccinate them, and then Munchausen's by proxy, or they've got loads and loads of different names now, or shaken baby syndrome, or non-accidental injury, or accidental salt poisoning,
sudden infant death syndrome, sudden adult death syndrome, things like these are all kind of
that's another one. Yes.
I mean, this is a horror story. Like I said before the show, I said that it is a horror story, but it is a horror story that I think we're all going to have to kind of swallow, really, because, like I said, every single word, and I have checked the sources. Most people who know me know that I've checked the source and everything. Everything is 100% to the point where it's like I was actually.
My
And I
computer's
will say this:
died.
I was actually not only impressed but shocked at the level of some of the actual information.
My
Okay, Rachel, should we wrap it up there? Well, I think we may have lost Christina. I think the beauty side. Well, what we're going to do is, right, hopefully, we can get either Christina and get back on. If not, what we'll do is we'll end the show there because we're going to stop about an hour anyway. But I want to get Christina back on because she's actually written a couple of more books. And her second book, I believe, if I remember, she told me correctly, it has parts written by world-renowned leaders in their field. Have actually written parts of the book, I believe, if I remember correctly, what she said. So that's another one that I would like to discuss, but I haven't read that one for myself yet, so I'd like to read it before I discuss it. But the one I have read, because like I said, as we said earlier, there is in the past before you even get a crumb of truth, and then by the time you've got that crumb of truth, you find you've lost a lot of time. But vaccination policy and the UK government, the untold truth. This book should be on every parent's shelf. I am telling you now. I've been called insane, neglective, stuff like that, because I say about vaccines with my children because I've read stuff. I've like Christine was discussing tonight. They're historic against the whole thing, and I say this goes back about 100 years. I've got a book. I actually think I actually got a book, 100 Years of Vaccination Horror, I think it's called. That's a really bad one. But I suggest reading this one because this is the most digestible, like I said. It comes from the point of a parent being accused because they dare to ask questions and want solutions and answers to why children are damaged. And I think a lot of us who deal with things like autism, ADD, stuff like that, could understand answers. You come up against, same as Christina was saying, not as harsh, I'd say, but we all come up against. So you will relate in that manner. It won't not be so much about Munchausen by proxy, but most parents would have one point had their parents in their bound. If you read the book and you read a bit more, we empower ourselves with this knowledge, which is she's actually of her research and what she's been uncovered. I think Christina's trying to come back in. If you can hear me, Christina, it's saying your device is not connected, so you've got to allow permission to your mic so I can bring in the studio. If not, we'll wrap up there and we'll try and organise another night because, like Christina said, this will take about 10 shows to kind of break down and digest if we talk through it, and that's the thing. So I suggest reading it. I'm more wanting to get sort of Christina's sort of story of why she got into it, because this is not a person who went out and got 30 doctorates and come saying it. This is a person who started from a personal position of just wanting to know the truth and wanting justice and wanting to basically fight an unfair label. I would say please read it. I don't think we're going to get Christina back on. So what we'll try and do is I will try and get Christina back to discuss more. Hopefully read a book so when she discusses, we discuss that bit, she'll understand more. But it is definitely a must read. Definitely, as we're discussing tonight, it's set out amazingly. The information is coherent. You can follow the book. It draws you in because there is a personal aspect to it. There's a lot of factual aspects to it. There's a lot of things that we will all find in this book that it's like we said, like a yellow card system, vaccine damage. There's a lot of stuff in this book where it marries up to a lot of what we know and what we've seen, and it answers a lot of questions that we're still waiting to hear on the news and from the politicians. So with that, I'm going to leave that there, and what I'll do is I'll try and get Christina back on again, and we'll do this again another night, and hopefully we won't have any so much problems with the gear and stuff like that, with the electricals. But yes, thank you for coming on, Christina, if you can still hear me. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hopefully we can get Christina back on again, and we can discuss this further. This is, I know, a subject that's on most of your lips. This book really does help, and hopefully we can talk about this a bit more. Hopefully this doesn't get taken down. So thank you again for Christina, and not only for your research and everything you've done, because this really actually will help so many parents. It really is helping parents. It's what we need now. The truth is what we need. The untold truth. Not the truth, the narrative. So what I'll do is I'll leave it there. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you everyone for listening after this. I'm going to try and grab the links off Christina for the books and the websites and stuff like that, so I can embed it onto the video. So look later on if you want links. Please, the book's available on Amazon for a very, very reasonable price, and I can assure you, you will not regret getting this book, and you will not regret reading it. I can assure you. Right. On that note, I shall bid you good evening. Until next time. Thank you very much. Bye.